Hello, well, I'm back with the second lesson. Let's hope this will be the final. I don't know because it is layers of thought in it that we still have to unpack in this story. But what you need to know at this juncture is Shakespeare is a master of intrigue, and probably we have got a sense of it. Yes, when we stopped where we did the last time with just a simple phrase on page that was 15 called a European, right? So that's where we stopped. And that is where, remember, when Jonathan goes to the other tree, he says, I've done something here, a European. That's the only link. And then he starts again juggling his memory. So every time there is a thought, every time you find Joyanto in a pensive mood, you know he is actually digging deep into his memory to unearth whatever happened, sorry, whatever happened in Bundi the last time when he was here as a 6-year-old boy. So when he talks about a European, and immediately Shankar asks the question, European? He said, okay, I can't recall anything. And then a very important statement: memory is a strange business. On page 15, please do mark it. Memory is a strange business. What is strange about memory? Yes, you might say, well, if you ask me, I'll say the strangeness of memory is at times it's very selective. It allows you to remember some things, maybe at times it allows you to forget. Probably that is the strangeness. What is coming back, certain things that come back are not the ones that you would want to remember, and some of the things that you really want to recollect do not come back. uh, I don't know, I think of that as memory being a strange business. You think, give me your answer, put it down. Okay, the next there is only a reference to, if you want to heighten the sense of mystery, he recollects that there was a cook at that time, he was called Dilavar. And to add some, if in modern jargon, some masala to it, he had a scar on his left cheek and his eyes were always red. Yes. But what is the caveat? He was an excellent cook. So it didn't matter whether he had a scar or whether his eyes were perpetually red. The reason for the redness is not given. Now, this is a story in a school book. Yes. I leave you to imagine the reasons why. So the scar on his left cheek and his eyes, which were red, unimportant because he was a great cook. So as a 6-year-old child, he has sort of the memory of this frightening young man, a cook, as being etched there for a long time, and because that's what comes back. And then the next line, Joyanto's memories began returning one by one soon after dinner when we went to the drawing room. So as if there was the lid was there that has burst open and all the thoughts are coming back. And then you have the story. Very important, page 15. I'm going to read that paragraph because you need to know the details, yes? One of Jointo's uncles had brought for him from Switzerland a 12-inch long figure of an old man, dressed in a traditional Swiss style. Apparently, it was very lifelike, apparently. Although it was not mechanized, that we have dolls nowadays, it was possible to bend and twist its limbs. Okay, so you could bend and twist the limbs. Its face had a smile, and on its head it wore a Swiss cap with a little yellow feather sticking out. Its clothes, especially in their little details, were perfect: belt, buttons, pockets, collars, socks, and even little buckles on the shoes. How how very distinct the memory is, Jointo's memory of this doll, that he remembers each and every minute detail. Remember that, please. Remember that. So that means this doll had a very important role to play in Jayanto's life when he was a 6-year-old. Yes. And there is a link with Bundi. What? All right. Still with the story, his uncle had returned from Europe shortly before Jayanto left for Bundi. The little old man had been bought in a village in Switzerland. Yes. So he's not the usual kind of a doll. He's a little old man. Yes. Okay. A village in Switzerland. The man who sold him had jokingly said to Jayanto's uncle, he's called Fritz, lending the name of the doll lends itself to the story. You must call him by this name. He won't respond to any other. I mean, that's generally when you say when you go to buy something which is alive, right? Something that is living. Yes, you're going to buy a dog, and the dog owner says you must call him Tommy because he will not, or Bruno or whatever. There's so many. These are the first few names that are coming to my mind. You go to buy a cat, he said she'll respond only if you call her Tabby. I mean, just when you go to buy something alive, right? Something that is living. Here you have some, but of course, he says jokingly, he won't respond to any other, telling the uncle that look after the doll is special, adding a new dimension to the doll, right? And what is Joyanto's response is, I had lots of toys because his parents used to gift him a lot, he was the only child. But once I had Fritz, I forgot all my other toys. I played only with him. Important lines moving from page 15 to 16. I began to spend hours just talking to him. So Fritz became a companion for him, probably like a brother. He was the only child, so there was nobody of his age around him, right? He had come to Bundi on a holiday, he carried Fritz with him. So when his parents were busy with other things, he used to sit and chat with Fritz, imagining him to be his brother, making him more living than what he actually was. Please remember that, yes? Fritz had a funny smile on his face and a look in his eyes, and it seemed to me as though he could understand every word. So, from the beginning, even as a child, this is the memory, remember? He is narrating it to Shankar. So, even as a child, he felt that Fritz appeared to be alive because there was a look on his face as if he was responding to my story, or he was trying to answer my question, or he had all-knowing smile on his face as if he was appreciating what I was doing. Sometimes I wondered if he could actually converse with me if I could speak to him in German. So, as far as that, remember, please remember this. Jayanto actually harbored that kind of belief that if he knew German, probably Fritz would have replied to him. The next sentence. Now it seems like a childish fantasy, but at that time, the whole thing was very real to me. I'm going to ask you this question now. He says, now it appears to be a childlike fantasy. That time, it was very real to me. I'm going to ask you this question within a few minutes. I had all in the time for Fritz. So he spent a lot of time with Fritz. And naturally, Shankar's question immediately after that is what happened to the doll. I brought it to Bundi, it was destroyed here. He says, destroyed here. Destroyed how? And then the next part of the detailing on page 16. They were sitting on a lawn having tea, and he kept his doll at the side. And because I was not really old enough to have tea, but I insisted, and in the process, the cup tilted and some of the hot tea fell on my pants. I ran inside to change and came back to find that Fritz had disappeared. I looked around and found quite soon that a couple of stray dogs were having a nice tug of war with Fritz. So you can imagine a little doll and the sharp teeth of the dogs must have ripped it apart, yes. Although he didn't actually come apart, they make good toys in Switzerland. His face was battered beyond recognition and his clothes were torn. In other words, he did not exist for me anymore. He was dead. It was more than a toy for him. Yes, it was like a companion. So, with his face being mangled, his clothes stripped, he was a misshapen little toy that time. He says that he had, he was dead for me. He didn't exist for me anymore. He was dead. Yes. You know, Shankar naturally is intrigued. What happens? What did you do with it? Threw it? Where did you throw it? I arranged for his funeral, like you would arrange for a pet, somebody very close to you. A funeral for a doll? Naturally. What do you mean? That was Shankar's question. I buried him under the deodar tree. The link? That's why, in the hurry to find where the deodar tree is, yes, it is where it was. At that point in time, my question now to you is, was he really thinking about the tree? Or somewhere deep in his subconscious, there was the buried doll, Fritz? Probably. I had wanted to make a coffin because, after all, Fritz was a European. But I could not find even a little box, so I buried him just like that. So, a very important line here. At last, the mystery of the deodar tree was solved. Now Shankar knows why the deodar tree featured so deeply in Jayanto's subconscious. Very deep-rooted memory. Yes. From there, we move on to the night. And you know, night is the essence of something which is mysterious, right? And that very night, uh, what he, though Shankar was very tired after a long day, he fell asleep. But he was awakened by a slight noise. And when he looked up, he saw that there was a look of anxiety on Jointo's face. And he switched on the light and he said, "Are you not feeling well? What is wrong?" The next question is very important. Jointo asked, "Do you think this circuit house has got small animals? I mean, like cats or mice?" He said, Shankar said, "Why do you ask?" "Because I felt there was something walking over my chest as I was lying down." Yes. Well, you know, the tendency of rats and mice generally to climb through drains and to enter the room at night. Uh, but like Shankar says, I've not seen, never heard of them climbing onto beds. But Joyanto said that this is the second time that I've woken up actually. The first was when he heard a noise at the window and he felt there was something outside trying to come in. And the second was, and you know, when there's a noise at the window, immediately the thought is, oh, it must be a animal or a rodent or whatever. Uh, but he said, "Didn't you switch on the light? Did you see anything?" He said, "No, there was nothing. There was nothing within." So that's why he went back to sleep. And then, you know, they didn't find anything in the room. And then he shows something that's on page 18. Jointo was staring hard at the cover of his quilt. "Look at this." I bent over the cloth and saw tiny brown circular marks on it. Tiny brown circular marks, you know, like the pug of a tiny animal. Yes. Could have been made by a cat. That was his response. Yes. Jointo did not reply. Yes. And but it was very clear to Shankar that something just was very, very disturbing. He was very disturbed. Some other memory, some other incident from the past had come back, or he was trying to figure out what these claw marks signified. But it was quite late in the night, so Shankar immediately went back to bed, and he realized that he could have to give Jonto some kind of a tranquilizer the next day so that he could have a peaceful sleep, because he didn't appear too well. Yes, and they had also planned to go to the fort the next day. But when they went to the fort the next day, initially Jonto did show a lot of enthusiasm, but it died off very soon, because at one point in time Shankar realized that Jonto was not around with him walking around the fort. They'd gone to see the Bundi fort. So then he he realized that he was told that Jayanto was on the terrace, and he went to look for Jayanto. He said that, "Have you finished seeing anything? If so, let's go home." So you see, his mind is not in the visit to the fort. His mind is preoccupied, and we know what it is preoccupied with because of what has happened the previous night, right? So the trip to the fort was cut short. Yes, and they drive back. On the way back, there's something that Shankar notices. Page 20, the first paragraph. I offered him a cigarette, he refused. I noticed a veiled excitement in the movement of his hands. This excitement is not born of something that something that you're looking forward to. This excitement is born of uneasiness, a sense of disquiet. When you're not sure, is it right what I'm thinking, or should there be something else? When you are pondering about certain ideas and you cannot pinpoint what the exact answer should be. So an excitement which is born out of uneasiness and disquiet. One moment he placed his hands near the window, then on his lap. Immediately afterwards began biting his nails. He said there was a restlessness in him. Yes, this uneasiness, disquiet. And because Jayanto was actually very quiet by nature, so it was more disturbing for Shankar to see this, yes. Then immediately Shankar, as a good friend, he said, Can you share your problem with me? Maybe I'll find a solution. So Jayanto said, You will not believe what I'm going to say. I said, but at least let us discuss. We can't find a solution unless I know. Then the line, which sort of translates into, no, I won't use the word translate, which transforms this ordinary narrative into one of probably a supernatural element. Yes, supernaturalism creeps into, like the little figure that crept into the room the previous night. Fritz came into our room last night. Page 20. Those little marks on my quills were his footprints. What does this tell us about Jayanto? Remember that Venn diagram that I asked you to draw? Yes. Do you think this statement is right in the middle of the Venn, where the past and the present coincide? Yes. And they come together in a very intriguing fashion, right at the center. Okay? Realm of supernatural, remember? It's very difficult for us to find a logical answer. You critical thinkers out there, you those who believe in the scientific reality and not in these superstitions and supernaturalism, we cannot deny the fact that there is the sense of supernaturalism that has crept in, and I would like you to think of a logical answer to this, right? Okay. I immediately, what did he think? What did Shankar think? How could I talk sensibly to someone whose mind was obsessed with an absurd idea? The absurdity of this suggestion itself tells us what Jayanto's frame of mind was at that point in time. He said, I could distinctly feel it on my chest. There were 2 feet, not 4. He's absolutely certain it was Fritz. and then very important sentence, next paragraph, I could not allow a 37-year-old man to be upset by a simple memory from his childhood. Probably the use of the word simple here is a misfit. But for Shankar, he says it's a simple memory of a doll that was destroyed and he buried it. It's like we many a times, when we are playing games as a child, we do such things. But it has come to haunt him. He said, I cannot allow it. I cannot allow a 37-year-old sane man to break down into with such absurdity. Yes. So, an idea came to Shankar's mind. He said that if the doll had been buried somewhere 30 years ago and we knew the exact spot, he said, why not dig up the spot? And if you dig it up, he says he hopes that they would find, what would remain after 30 years? The metal pieces. Remember, there were the buckle, the belt, or the grass buttons on the shoe, or jacket, whatever. Those were the ones that would remain, and that would set at peace Jayanto's unsteady mind. So he said, okay, that is what I'm going to suggest. Yes, it would sort of, this obsession that is leading him on to insanity would come to an end. Okay, so he says, well, there is a garden. Uh, we'll get a gardener and we'll dig. We'll get a spade. When Jayanto came up with all these funny things, whether they'll get a spade or whether there'll be a gardener, he said, of course. I mean, there's a garden, so there should be a gardener. But Jayanto agreed to the suggestion. So it was later in the afternoon that the gardener came in and they took the spade and they went to the foot of the deodar tree. You have little details about Shankar promising to pay 5 rupees to the gardener and the 5 rupees. The story 1970-71, 5 rupees, lot of value. Yeah, don't brush it off. Yes, and of course the gardener also joking like whether they're asking him to dig, there'll be a treasure at the bottom of this pit that they are digging, and whether they're going to share it with him. Yes, but what is very important, there are two things. As he came closer, as Jayanto came closer, I saw the pallor on his face. He had become pale, fearful of what he was going to see. So you see, this paleness of the man also indicates that in his mind there is this absurd thought. I'm using the word absurd, but for him it is real, that Fritz did come back. Yes. I did hope we would find at least some part of the doll. Shankar was really hoping, because that would rest all his horrible thoughts to peace. Yes, that would ease off this kind of ambivalent state that Jayanto was in. So the question, how much should we dig? And very clear, at least 8 inches. So there are certain things that he remembers very clearly. Yes. The collar of Jayanto's shirt was soaked in sweat, and he kept staring at the ground unblinkingly. All these to show the kind of anxiety that Jayanto was going through. There was no sign of the doll. But suddenly there was the call of the peacock, and Shankar turned his head the other way. And when he turned back, he saw that actually Jayanto made a very strange sound, and his eyes were bulging out as if that the kind of fear that when you see probably a phantom, when you see a ghostly apparition. Yes, probably the eyes of Hamlet when he saw the ghost of his father. Yes, and the color faded from his face. His finger pointing to the ground. What is that? And what did they see? Lying flat on the back was a 12-inch long, pure white, perfect little human skeleton. Okay, now, a perfect little human skeleton. So, memory is a strange business, right? But This strange business and what Shankar had hoped to achieve also did not happen. They did not find any metal pieces, buttons, bells, nothing. They find a pure white, perfect little human skeleton. What do you think that was? What do you think that human skeleton indicated? What do you think happens to Jayanto on seeing that? Do you think Shankar will then move on from being a disbeliever in such supernatural thoughts to being a believer in it? Or do you think that is not a reality? It is only a figment of Jointo's imagination. But if it were a figment, if the claw marks, the marks on his quilt were the figment of his imagination, how can something which is tangible lying in that little pit beneath the 8 inches into the ground, which is seen by the gardener and Shankar, still be a figment of Jointo's imagination? Or is it, for more practical purposes, a doll manufactured in Switzerland with such precision to give it such a detailing of a human form that they actually made a plastic skeleton and they covered it with, padded it with the best of clothing so that the clothes will fall in place, because it would not fall into a stick. No matter how much you try with a stick figure and put a piece of cloth, it doesn't fall into place the way it would. So probably they created, they took their art of creating lifelike dolls to a level of perfection that we cannot imagine. And plastic probably does not uh, turn to dust. Yes. So though everything else did, became crumbs and pieces and dust, the plastic frame, I call it a frame, I'm not calling it a skeleton, the plastic frame remained, right? And remember, it's pure white. Yes. Human bones are not white, and especially when they are exposed to uh, uh, the kind of humidity beneath the ground, they would not remain white. Well, I'm giving you options. I'm giving you reasons to think of what do you think is was what they saw, right? Uh, yes, it is open ended. Satyajit Ray definitely had the intention of leaving this story open ended. You cannot get answers, logical answers to supernatural uh, incidents that take place. Can we give an answer to this? Yes, probably uh, difficult. So, what happens? I'm leaving you for a day to think about what exactly was that they saw, and how would you answer the question if I asked you, was it real or was it just the frame of a doll turned into reality through Joyanto's intense belief? I leave you with that question for today. Bye. Stay safe.